The massive ship appeared without warning above Earth's atmosphere, blocking out the sun over half the planet. Its hull stretched for kilometers, a construct of organic curves and metallic plating that defied conventional engineering. Within hours, every screen on Earth displayed the same message, transmitted in every known language simultaneously. Primitive species of Earth, you are hereby commanded to surrender your world to the Jakara Collective. Comply within 1 solar rotation or face annihilation. We have destroyed 17 civilizations. You will be the 18th. In the Situation Room beneath Washington, the president sat with her arms crossed. Helen Morris stared at the holographic projection of the alien vessel, with a calm expression that betrayed nothing of the chaos churning in her mind. Around the table sat military advisors, scientists, and world leaders connected via secure channels. The room smelled of coffee and tension. "Well," she said, breaking the tense silence, "that's certainly one way to introduce yourself." General Paul Griffin leaned forward in his chair. "Madam President, our satellites confirm the ship is roughly the size of Rhode Island. We're tracking what appear to be weapon ports along its ventral surface. The damn thing is just sitting there like it owns the place." "Have they made any hostile moves?" Helen asked. "None yet. Just the threat." Lisa Warren cleared her throat from her position at the far end of the table. The chief science advisor had been scribbling notes frantically since the transmission arrived. "We've analyzed the transmission thoroughly. The technology is advanced, certainly, but not beyond our theoretical understanding. The ship's power signature suggests fusion reactors, maybe antimatter drives. Impressive for sure, but not magical." Helen raised an eyebrow. "Not magical, good to know." She turned to the screen showing the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. "What are your thoughts, Richard?" Richard Hamilton's face was grim but composed on the display. "Our analysts say the same thing. Advanced, yes. Invincible, unclear. What concerns me most is their claim about destroying 17 civilizations. That's not a small number." "Could be a bluff," interjected Commander Jack Phillips from Naval Intelligence. He was a young officer who had made his name in cyber warfare. "Psychological warfare at its finest. Make us think resistance is futile before we even try." Helen nodded slowly, processing every word. "Or they're telling the truth and just encountered 17 civilizations that didn't know how to fight back." She stood up, placing her palms flat on the table surface. "I want a full assessment of their capabilities within 12 hours. Get me everything we know about that ship. Every sensor reading, every energy spike, everything. And someone get me a line to Beijing, Moscow, and Brussels. If they want Earth, they're going to find out what happens when you threaten a species that turned world wars into a competitive sport." Across the Atlantic in a military facility outside London, Lieutenant Colonel Amy Carter was briefing her squadron of pilots. The men and women before her were the best of the best, selected for the newly operational XR-7 Wraith fighters. These weren't your grandfather's fighter jets. These were humanity's first combat-ready spacecraft, built in secret over the past decade in orbital facilities that officially didn't exist. "Listen up," Amy said, her voice carrying across the hangar with practiced authority. "We all saw the message. We all know what's at stake. But here's what those aliens don't know about us." She paused, making eye contact with each pilot in turn. "We're the species that split the atom just to see if we could. We're the species that went to the moon with computers less powerful than your phones, just because someone said we couldn't. We don't surrender. We don't yield. We find a way to win, always have, always will." A young pilot named Kevin Ross raised his hand tentatively. "Colonel, what if they really did destroy 17 civilizations? What if we're just next on their list?" Amy smiled coldly. "Then they haven't met number 18 yet." She let that sink in for a moment. Those 17 civilizations, whoever they were, probably tried to negotiate or surrender. Maybe they were peaceful species who valued life over freedom. We're not those species. We're humans. We've been fighting each other for 10,000 years. We know warfare like a fish knows water. If these aliens want to fight, we'll give them one they'll never forget." The pilots straightened in their seats. The fear didn't vanish from their faces, but it was joined by something else now. Determination mixed with a healthy dose of human stubbornness. Back in Washington, President Morris received the preliminary reports. The alien ship was powerful, equipped with energy weapons and what appeared to be kinetic bombardment capabilities. But it was alone, one ship. One massive, intimidating, arrogant ship. She picked up the secure phone connecting her to the other nuclear powers. The line was encrypted with technology that would take a quantum computer years to crack. Gentlemen, ladies, I think it's time we showed our visitors what humanity does to bullies. Are we in agreement? One by one, the affirmatives came through. The president of China spoke first. We are in agreement. The Russian premier followed. We stand with Earth. The European Union representative was next. Unanimous consent from all member states. Good, Helen said with grim satisfaction. Then let's give them our answer. In orbit above Earth, hidden among what appeared to be commercial satellites, the defense network began to wake up. Systems that had been dormant for years suddenly came online. Weapons that officially didn't exist powered up their reactors. On the dark side of the moon, where no alien sensors had bothered to look carefully, 3 massive structures began charging their magnetic coils. The aliens had made a critical mistake. They had assumed that humanity was primitive, because humans still used chemical rockets for most of their space launches. They had assumed that a species barely beginning to explore its own solar system couldn't possibly pose a threat to a civilization that crossed the stars. They were about to learn how wrong assumptions could be. Helen Morris sat down at her desk to record humanity's response. Behind her hung the flags of every United Nations member state. The camera operator gave her a countdown. 3, 2, 1. To the Jakara Collective, she began, her voice steady and clear. We received your demand. We discussed it at length with representatives from every nation on Earth. After careful consideration, we have reached a unanimous decision. She paused for effect, letting the moment stretch. No. The single word hung in the air like a declaration of war because that's exactly what it was. The transmission continued as Helen Morris leaned forward slightly in her chair. You claim to have destroyed 17 civilizations, she said with an edge in her voice. Perhaps those civilizations didn't know how to defend themselves. Perhaps they were peaceful species who chose surrender over conflict. We are not those species. Humanity has spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of warfare. We've fought each other with sticks, stones, swords, guns, tanks, and nuclear weapons. We've nearly destroyed ourselves 6 times, and every time we pulled back from the brink, we learned something new about surviving the unsurvivable. Her expression hardened as she delivered the final message. You have 24 hours to leave our solar system. If you choose to stay, if you choose to attack, you will learn a very expensive lesson about threatening humans on their home world. We don't recommend it. The transmission ended and the recording was broadcast on every frequency humanity could manage, ensuring the aliens would receive it loud and clear. Aboard the Jakara vessel, Commander Vexthor watched. The human response, with 3 of his 4 eyes, narrowed in contempt. His chitinous exoskeleton reflected the blue glow of the command deck as he turned to his tactical officer with a dismissive gesture. Primitive arrogance. Vexthor clicked in his native language. They possess no shield technology, no energy weapons beyond crude lasers. Their fastest vessels barely achieve .03 light speed. What do they imagine they can do against us? Tactical Officer Krenza consulted her display, running her clawed fingers over the holographic interface. Scans indicate they have fission weapons, Commander. Crude atomic devices. Dangerous to their own species perhaps, but largely ineffective against our shields. Our defensive systems can absorb hundreds of their primitive explosions. Then we proceed as planned, Vexthor declared with confidence. At the designated time, we will demonstrate our power by eliminating one of their major population centers. They will see their defiance means nothing. Then they will surrender as all the others did before them. What Vexthor didn't know was that humanity's response was already in motion and had been since the moment the alien ship appeared, 600 kilometers below the Jakara ship. The Earth Defense Network went fully active. Satellites that had been disguised as commercial communications arrays began repositioning themselves with small thruster burns. Space stations that officially conducted scientific research opened hidden weapon bays that had been built into their structures from the beginning. And on the dark side of the moon, where no alien sensors had bothered to look carefully, 3 massive mass driver batteries came online with a deep magnetic hum. Colonel Amy Carter sat in the cockpit of her Wraith fighter, one of 200 identical craft hidden in orbital hangars that had been launched piece by piece over the past decade and assembled in the darkness of space. The Wraith program had been born from a simple assumption that humanity would eventually meet someone hostile out among the stars. That assumption was proving painfully accurate. Alpha Squadron, this is Carter, she spoke into her comm system. Status check sound off. One by one, her pilots confirmed readiness. Green across the board, Colonel, came the first response. Ready to fly came another. All systems nominal, reported a third. Behind them, another 12 squadrons representing 8 different nations reported the same state of readiness. The United Earth Defense Force, formed in secret after the first viable combat spacecraft had been tested, was ready for its first and possibly last mission. All squadrons, this is UEDF Command, came the voice of Admiral George Blake from the command center buried deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain. The Jakara have ignored our warning. They're powering up weapons and positioning for a strike on Tokyo. Rules of engagement are now active. You are authorized to engage the enemy. Amy felt the familiar calm settle over her consciousness, the same feeling she'd experienced during combat missions in her old fighter jet days, back when the enemy was human and the stakes were somehow smaller. Fear was there certainly, but it was distant, controlled and channeled into useful energy. You heard the man, she told her squadron over the open channel. Remember your training. These aliens think we're primitives playing with rockets. Let's teach them about human ingenuity and why you should never underestimate a species that turned warfare into a science. All craft launch on my mark. 200 Wraith fighters dropped their stealth shrouds simultaneously and lit their fusion engines. The alien sensors finally detected them, but by then reaction time was already being measured in fractions of seconds that the Jakara didn't have. Mark, Amy said calmly. The Wraith fighters accelerated faster than any human-piloted craft in recorded history, their inertial dampeners pushing the absolute limits of what their pilots could survive. The G-forces would have killed them instantly without the technology cushioning their bodies. They closed the distance to the Jakara ship in 40 seconds flat. Commander Vexthor watched in growing disbelief, as his sensor screen suddenly filled with contacts that appeared from nowhere. "What are these? Where did they come from?" he demanded. Unknown craft commander, Kreenza reported, and her voice was rising in alarm for the first time. They were not there, and now they are everywhere. Stealth technology we didn't detect. Our sensors show 200 individual vessels. Impossible, Vexthor hissed. These primitives don't have advanced stealth capabilities. Our intelligence was certain. The first missile impacts cut off his protest. Amy Carter's squadron had fired their opening salvo, each Wraith launching a pair of kinetic kill missiles moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The projectiles were simple, just dense metal moving very fast, but simplicity had its own elegance. The Jakara shields flickered under the impacts, absorbed the kinetic energy, and held firm. But the aliens now understood with sudden clarity that they were in an actual fight. "Return fire," Vexthor commanded loudly. "Destroy these insects before they damage something critical." Energy beams lanced from the alien ship, brilliant purple streams of directed plasma that could vaporize a spacecraft in an instant of contact. The temperature of each beam exceeded the surface of most stars, but the Wraith fighters were already moving, jinking and weaving in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully choreographed by computers and human intuition working together. 3 fighters were hit, their pilots dying instantly in bursts of light, but the rest pressed their attack without hesitation. "Their shields are holding," Lieutenant Kevin Ross reported over the comm channel. "Kinetics aren't doing enough damage. We need something bigger." "Then we switched to Plan B," Amy responded without hesitation. "All squadrons concentrate fire on Section 7 Alpha. Let's see if we can overload a single point on their defensive grid." What followed was a masterclass in human tactical thinking that would be studied for generations. While half the fighters continued their harassment runs, drawing alien fire and keeping the point defense systems busy, the other half concentrated their entire payload on a single 100-meter section of the ship's shield envelope. Missile after missile slammed into the exact same spot, each impact adding energy to the accumulating stress on the shield generators below. On Earth, the mass drivers on the lunar surface fired in perfect synchronization. 3 tungsten telephone poles, each weighing 20 tons, accelerated to near relativistic speeds through magnetic coils that stretched for kilometers. They crossed the distance between moon and target in mere seconds, their impacts calculated down to the microsecond to hit the same weak point the fighters were hammering. The Jakara shields failed with a burst of energy visible from the ground. "Breach," Kreenza shouted across the command deck. Section 7 Alpha shields have collapsed completely. We're exposed. Before Vexthor could issue orders or even process what was happening, human ingenuity struck again with devastating effect. A single Wraith fighter piloted by Captain Greg Nelson dove through the breach without hesitation. His craft carried no missiles and no kinetic weapons. Instead, it carried something the aliens hadn't seen used in warfare for centuries: a crude, dirty and absolutely devastating 20-megaton thermonuclear warhead, strapped to his fighter like a suicide vest. Greg's last words over the comm were simple and clear. "For Earth," he said. The nuclear explosion inside the shield perimeter was catastrophic beyond measure. The Jakara ship had been designed and built to withstand external attacks from energy weapons and kinetic strikes coming from space. Nobody had ever considered that an enemy would breach the shields and detonate a fusion weapon inside the protective barrier. A quarter of the massive vessel simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant by temperatures that briefly matched the core of a star. Atmosphere vented into space in massive plumes. Critical systems failed across half the remaining structure. Secondary explosions rippled through compartments as power conduits overloaded, but the ship didn't die. Not completely. It was wounded, badly wounded, but still functional enough to be a threat. Vexthor picked himself up from the deck where the explosion had thrown him, green blood leaking from a deep gash in his carapace. Around him, the command center was pure chaos. Consoles sparked and smoked. Crew members lay injured or dead at their stations, and the ship's computer systems screamed warnings in multiple overlapping voices. "Status report." He roared over the noise. 27% of the ship is completely gone. Kreenza reported, and her voice was shaking with shock and pain. "Primary weapons are mostly offline. Shields are failing across all remaining sections. Life support is compromised in 40% of intact compartments. We're dying, Commander." Vexthor stared at the tactical display showing the remaining human fighters regrouping for another attack wave. These weren't primitives fumbling with basic technology. These were warriors. Clever and vicious and innovative warriors who understood combat at a fundamental level. "Open a channel to the human leadership," he said quietly. "Perhaps we can negotiate terms of withdrawal." "Commander?" Kreenza interrupted with alarm. "Sensors detect incoming projectiles from the planet's surface. Hundreds of them approaching fast." She paused, checking her readings twice to make sure they were accurate. "They're missiles, Commander, nuclear missiles by the signature." Vexthor felt his 3 hearts sink in his chest. The humans weren't interested in negotiation or accepting surrender. They were interested in making a point that would echo across the galaxy. "All power to engines," he commanded desperately. "Get us out of orbit now. Get us away from this cursed world before they finish us." But it was already too late for escape. The first wave of intercontinental ballistic missiles, fired from silos and submarines across 5 continents, reached the Jakara ship. Each warhead detonated in sequence, adding to the cascade of destruction already consuming the vessel. The aliens' damaged shields couldn't stop them all. Some got through. Secondary explosions rippled across the hull like fireworks. Amy Carter and her surviving pilots watched from a safe distance as the massive alien vessel that had threatened to annihilate humanity tried desperately to escape Earth's gravity well. It was listing badly to one side, trailing debris and frozen atmosphere, its main engines struggling to build enough speed for a retreat. "UEDF command to all squadrons." Admiral Blake's voice came through, carrying satisfaction and weariness in equal measure. "Cease fire immediately. Let them run back to wherever they came from." "Sir?" Amy asked with confusion. "We can finish them right now, end this threat permanently." "I know, Colonel," Blake replied, "but I want them to survive this encounter. I want them to limp back to their collective and tell everyone exactly what happened when they tried to bully Earth. Sometimes the best victory isn't killing your enemy outright. It's making sure they survive to remember why they should never ever come back." Amy watched the crippled alien ship slowly accelerate away from Earth, leaving a trail of debris that would burn up in the atmosphere for weeks. Around her, the other pilots were silent, processing what they had just accomplished. 3 human fighters had been lost, 3 pilots who had volunteered knowing the risks. But Earth still stood, humanity still existed, and the aliens who came with threats were leaving broken and defeated. On the surface, billions of people watched the alien ship retreat. In cities across every continent, celebrations erupted spontaneously. Strangers hugged in the streets. Old enemies shook hands. For the first time in human history, every person on Earth felt truly united by something bigger than nationality or religion or politics. In the Jakara command center, Vexthor watched Earth shrink in the rear displays. The beautiful blue and green planet that had seemed so vulnerable now looked more like a trap. A deceptively peaceful world hiding warriors who refused to surrender. Mark the Sol system as forbidden territory, he ordered. Any Jakara ship that approaches is to withdraw immediately without engagement. The collective will want to know why, Krinza said weakly. Tell them we found humans, Vexthor replied simply. The Jakara vessel barely made it to the edge of the solar system before its engines finally stabilized enough for sustained flight. Commander Vexthor stood in what remained of his command center, staring at the damage reports with growing horror that threatened to overwhelm his military discipline. Of his crew of 5,000, less than 2,000 had survived the battle. His mighty warship, which had brought entire civilizations to their knees through reputation alone, was now a crippled hulk, held together by emergency force fields and desperate engineering. How did this happen? He asked no one in particular. How did primitives accomplish this? Krinza was sporting bandages across 2 of her 4 limbs. Her carapace cracked in several places. She pulled up the combat logs on a functioning display. We underestimated them completely, Commander. Our intelligence suggested they had barely reached basic space travel capability. We saw their chemical rockets and assumed they were centuries behind our technology level. What did we miss? Vexthor asked. Everything, Krinza replied simply. She displayed the human tactics on the surviving screens, each maneuver highlighted in different colors. Those fighters we faced weren't primitive spacecraft. They had inertial dampening systems, stealth technology that fooled our sensors and weapons guided by sophisticated artificial intelligence. Their missiles used miniaturized fusion drives. They've been preparing for exactly this scenario. Vexthor watched the replay of the battle, seeing for the first time how precisely the humans had executed their strategy. Every move had been calculated. The scattered attacks to probe defenses and map shield strength. The concentrated assault to breach a single point. The sacrifice play with the nuclear weapon inside their shields. And finally, the overwhelming bombardment from the surface to drive home their message with absolute clarity. They've been fighting each other for their entire evolutionary history, Krinza continued, pulling up data from their cultural database. Our records show thousands of wars, conflicts, and military engagements over just the past few centuries alone. They've refined warfare to an art form and a science simultaneously, and they've done it all on one planet, competing against themselves, pushing each other to develop better weapons and tactics. Send a message to the collective immediately, Vexthor ordered. Mark the Sol system as forbidden territory. Any Jakara ship that approaches Earth is to withdraw without making contact. Commander, the collective will demand to know why we're declaring an entire system off limits, Krinza said carefully. Tell them the truth, Vexthor interrupted. Tell them we found a species that doesn't surrender under any circumstances. Tell them we found a species that would rather die fighting than live under occupation. Tell them we found humans and that engaging them is not worth the cost. Back on Earth, the celebration was cautious and measured. The alien ship was gone, but no one was naive enough to think this was over forever. In capital cities around the world, leaders were already meeting to discuss the long-term implications of first contact. President Helen Morris stood before the United Nations General Assembly, addressing representatives of every nation on Earth. The chamber was packed beyond capacity and billions more watched via live broadcast on every available screen. Today humanity passed a test we didn't choose and didn't want, she began, her voice steady and clear. We were threatened with complete annihilation and we responded not with panic but with purpose and unity. We showed our enemy that Earth is not defenseless and humanity is not prey. She paused, letting her words sink into the minds of everyone listening. But we also learned something crucial. We're not alone in the universe. There are other species out there among the stars, and not all of them are friendly or peaceful. Today we faced one ship. Next time it might be an entire fleet. We need to be ready for that possibility. The president outlined new initiatives that would reshape human civilization. The expansion of the United Earth Defense Force with volunteers from every nation. Increased funding for space technology and weapons development. The establishment of defensive installations throughout the solar system. And most importantly, a unified planetary government specifically for matters of defense and space exploration. We remain individual nations with individual cultures and individual peoples, Morris explained carefully. But when Earth itself is threatened, when our entire species faces extinction, we respond as one unified force. Today proved we can do that. Let's make sure we never forget this lesson or become complacent. In London, Colonel Amy Carter received a promotion to general and command of the expanded UEDF Fighter Corps. She stood before a mixed group of veterans from the battle and eager new recruits who wanted to be part of humanity's shield against the darkness. "Some of you think we won a great victory up there," she told them bluntly. "We didn't. We won one fight against one ship. The Jakara came here expecting easy prey and we bloodied their nose badly. But there are other species out there and some of them might be smarter than the Jakara. Some might not give us a warning. Some might not come alone with just one vessel." She looked at each face in turn, making sure they understood. "Our job is to make sure that when they come, when they threaten our home, we're ready for them. We train harder than any military force in human history. We push our technology further than anyone thought possible. And we never ever let our guard down, because Earth isn't just our home. It's the only home humanity has, and we will defend it with everything we have." Dr. Lisa Warren was leading a scientific team analyzing the wreckage from destroyed Jakara systems that had fallen to Earth during the battle. Every piece was being studied carefully, every alien technology being reverse engineered and understood. "Look at this," she told her assistant Daniel Price, pointing to a holographic display of an alien shield generator. "Their technology is advanced, but it's highly specialized. They built it to defeat energy weapons and kinetic strikes from outside. They never considered someone would breach the shield and detonate inside it. They weren't creative," Daniel observed. "Exactly right," Lisa agreed. "They followed a formula that worked 17 times before. But humans don't follow predictable formulas. We improvise, we adapt. We think in ways that break the standard patterns. That's our advantage over them." Lisa pulled up a comparison chart showing human and Jakara technology side by side. "We're behind them in raw power, maybe by 50 years of development, but we're ahead in innovation, in tactical thinking, and in sheer determination. If we can close the technology gap while maintaining our edge and creativity, we'll be fine. And if we can't close that gap?" Daniel asked. Lisa smiled grimly. "Then we'll improvise something else. That's what humans do best." 6 months after the battle, Earth had transformed in ways that would have seemed impossible before the Jakara arrived. The massive alien ship's appearance had done what centuries of diplomacy and countless peace treaties couldn't accomplish. It had united humanity completely and without reservation. National borders still existed on maps, but they felt less important somehow when every human alive had watched their species face extinction. Together, the United Earth Defense Force had expanded from a few secret squadrons to a full military branch with personnel from every nation on the planet. Shipyards in orbit around Earth and on the Moon worked around the clock, building the next generation of defense platforms and warships. Mars, which had previously been home to just a few scientific outposts, was now being rapidly colonized to serve as a backup population center and industrial base in case Earth ever fell. President Helen Morris, now officially the first Chancellor of the United Earth Coalition, sat in her office reviewing the latest intelligence reports. The data came from humanity's first deep space probes that had been sent beyond the solar system to scout for potential threats and gather information about galactic civilization. Admiral George Blake entered her office, carrying a tablet with urgent information. "Chancellor, you need to see this immediately," he said. Morris took the device and read the report, her eyes widening with each paragraph. "Is this confirmed through multiple sources?" she asked. "3 different intercepts, ma'am," Blake replied. "The Jakara Collective has been broadcasting warnings about Earth across multiple star systems. They're telling other species to avoid our system entirely. They're actually afraid of us," Morris said, struggling to believe it. "More than that," Blake continued. "They're telling everyone what happened here. Look at the translated intercepts we captured." Morris read the Jakara message carefully. "Warning to all collective members and allied species. The star system designated Sol 3 as home to a hostile species called humans. Do not approach. Do not threaten. Do not engage under any circumstances. Species assessment shows they are extremely dangerous. Civilization level appears barbaric. Technology level is developing rapidly. Threat level is maximum. This species prefers death to submission. They possess nuclear weapons and are not afraid to use them in combat. They fight with creativity and desperation. 17 civilizations fell to our standard conquest protocols. We are fortunate the 18th species let us leave alive." Morris couldn't help but smile at the irony. "We've become the monster story they tell their children at night," she said. "There's more," Blake added. Our deep space probes picked up transmissions from several other species in nearby systems. They're talking about us too. Some are curious about meeting us, some are frightened of what we represent, and some," he paused for effect, "some sound genuinely impressed." "Impressed," Morris repeated. "The Jakara weren't the only aggressive species out here apparently," Blake explained. "There are other civilizations who've built their empires through conquest and intimidation, and now they all know there's a new player on the galactic stage, one that doesn't surrender when threatened." Morris set down the tablet and walked to the large window, looking up at the stars visible in the daytime sky. "Do you think we did the right thing, George?" she asked quietly, fighting instead of trying to negotiate or find a peaceful solution. "They didn't give us a choice, ma'am," Blake replied firmly. "They came with threats and ultimatums, not invitations to negotiate or discuss peaceful coexistence. We responded appropriately to aggression." "I know we did," Morris said, "but I wonder what we've started by showing the galaxy that humans will fight back. Have we painted a permanent target on our backs?" Blake joined her at the window, both of them looking at the same stars. "Maybe we have, but we've also shown every potential aggressor that targeting us comes with serious consequences. Sometimes peace isn't about being harmless or avoiding conflict. It's about being too dangerous to attack without serious consideration." Far from Earth in a sector of space, humanity didn't even have proper names for yet. A council of species met to discuss the Sol system incident. The attendees represented 40 different civilizations, some peaceful traders, some aggressive conquerors, all deeply concerned about the implications. A species that looked like floating jellyfish with bioluminescent patterns spoke through a universal translator. The Jakara claimed this human species is exceptionally violent and unpredictable. Should we be concerned about expansion into our territories? A crystalline entity chimed in, its voice like breaking glass translated into comprehensible speech. The Jakara initiated hostility against a developing world. The humans merely defended themselves. "This seems entirely reasonable behavior." "Reasonable," hissed a reptilian delegate with scaled skin. "They destroyed a quarter of a Jakara warship. Do you understand how powerful those vessels are? And these humans are barely a Type 1 civilization on the development scale. Perhaps that's exactly why they're dangerous," suggested an avian creature with 4 wings. "They're young enough to still think fighting is a viable first option instead of a last resort." The debate continued for many hours, but the conclusion reached was surprisingly unanimous. Humanity would be monitored carefully but left alone. No one in the council wanted to be the next species that provoked the humans and faced similar consequences. Back on Earth in a small apartment in Seattle, former fighter pilot Kevin Ross sat with his young daughter on his lap, reading her a bedtime story. She was 5 years old and already fascinated by the stars and space. "Daddy, are there really aliens out there?" she asked with innocent curiosity. Kevin thought about the battle, about the friends he'd lost, about the Jakara ship limping away from Earth trailing debris. "Yes, sweetie, there are definitely aliens out there," he answered honestly. "Are they nice aliens?" she asked. "Some probably are," Kevin said carefully. "Some probably aren't nice at all. But you know what?" "What, Daddy?" she asked. "If they're not nice, if they try to hurt us or our home, we'll be ready for them. Because humans don't give up easily. We protect our home and each other. Always have and always will." His daughter seemed satisfied with that answer and settled in to sleep peacefully. Kevin watched her innocent face and made a silent promise that her generation would inherit a safer galaxy. One where humanity's reputation for defending itself kept the predators at bay. In space high above Earth, General Amy Carter floated in the observation deck of the UEDF headquarters station, looking down at the blue and green sphere that was home. Beside her in the training sections, young pilots practiced in advanced simulators, preparing for threats that might never come, but probably would. The Jakara had commanded Earth to yield. They had threatened complete annihilation. And humanity had laughed, not from ignorance or foolish bravado, but from the deep understanding that some things were worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth risking everything to protect. Earth was one of those things, and humanity would never forget that lesson.